everyone, I'm Ian McCarthy of Lifting for Life, and today I'm bringing you another installment of the Lifting for Life Q&A series. And today's question comes from Chadwick Jones, who asks, what is the biggest mistake you see pro-level bodybuilders doing that you would be able to coach them to do better? Interestingly, in thinking about this question, it struck me that I probably wouldn't get into the issues that one might think would be obvious, like training frequency. And I'll come back to why in a moment, but to answer the question in terms of what I think I actually would do, I would probably get into a discussion of exercise technique, in that, in having watched a lot of footage of IFBB pros train, I think most of what I've seen, most of the exercises I've seen IFBB pros do, I've seen them use good form. Obviously, this is going to be very dependent on who you watch. I think that there might be a risk of exaggerating the degree to which IFBB pros use poor form based on particular cases or people who are known to use bad form. But with exercises like barbell squats, from what I've seen, it seems pretty common for there to be issues with technique, which might be arising from kind of the attitude of wanting to isolate muscles. And it would be really interesting, this is kind of an aside, but it would be really interesting to see take an IFBB pro, someone who maybe has even been doing this for 10 or 15 or 20 years, and then hand them over to powerlifting or strength coaches who are just profound experts on squatting, and see what the result is. And then what would be really interesting would be to see if taking that improved technique and applying it in practice would result in differences that would actually be noticeable. I would be incredibly curious to see that. Now, to come back to why I wouldn't get into something like training frequency, it's interesting because on the one hand, absolutely I think it makes sense to say that prominent figures in the evidence-based community probably know very, very, very significantly more about the science of fitness. This is incredibly broad, but whether it's to do with protein intake, whether it's to do with training frequency, than does the average IFBB pro. But that's one issue, the science of, again, protein intake, how often you should train a muscle based on this research and so on. But that's a different thing than that which in practice will result in the best results for an IFBB pro. And you have to keep in mind that these people, let's really think about the people at the very top of IFBB pro bodybuilding. So they're the elite of the genetic elite. It's like you have genetically average, above average, getting into the person who's just below elite, the person who's elite, and then the person who's at the top of the pile of the elite, the person who's significantly genetically above the person who's already in the elite. So we're talking about those people, and we're talking about people who have access to whatever super supplements they believe to be appropriate and so on. So how relevant is essentially all of the research done on 24-year-old, moderately resistance-trained, probably genetically average people? By the way, this isn't really a criticism of the literature. I find tremendous value in the literature as a whole, but the question is, how applicable is it to these people? I would say not wholly inapplicable. I'm sure you can draw a grain of truth from it that would assist them, but much, much, much less applicable than it is to the people who are essentially the people who are being used in these studies. So I tend to think that IFBB pros and their coaches, when it comes to practical application, they've got it figured out because they're the people who have been doing this for, and this depends on whether or not we're talking about individuals or as a whole, but this has existed for 40 plus years. Obviously, people come and go. We have advancements in terms of probably drugs are the biggest deal on that side of the sport of bodybuilding. But if looking at that community as a whole, those are the people who have been in the trenches all this time. And so if I had to, make if the scenario is that of what am I going to say to the person who's been doing that for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. And what am I going to say to them on the basis of research, which is not done on people like them? I'm probably going to say nothing or very little 95% of the time. And then maybe the 5% of the time would be like, hey, don't you think it would be really interesting if this top pro who like looks amazing anyway, they're one of the best in the world, do you think they would benefit from, squatting differently because their range of motion is super restricted? And there is some research, but then again, we would come back to the point of, is it really applicable to them? But maybe, hey, let's at least try it on this basis. But that's quite different to the position that that I've probably taken in the past, and it's very appealing and easy to fall into of, oh, they're just fucking morons. Well, I'm sure that some people doing that are, just like as human beings, they are very unintelligent, but that's kind of different to the issue of, do they understand what needs to be done in that position to get the results they want? And again, I think the more reasonable position is to say that they've got it figured out. I'm sure that they, through experience, will continue to improve more. So at least my hope would be they would continue to improve their techniques over time as a result of trial and error, because again, I don't think it's the science that's pushing that forward. But again, this fundamentally comes back to the difference between the research that's being done. I find tremendous value in it. I think it can be hugely beneficial to most people. I think it can make a huge difference in terms of saving time, saving money, saving effort that doesn't need to be put into the process, with the ultimate result being, people are bigger, stronger, healthier, happier, etc. But that's just really different to that person I described who's presumably endeavoring to be like the biggest, freakiest human being on the planet, and they have genetics just drastically different, and what it is they're doing is drastically different. I think it's pretty reasonable for that person to just focus on their own thing, and I don't think I have a whole lot to say to them in terms of helping them beyond some of the things I mentioned. So I guess the phrase that comes to mind is stay in your lane, and be very cognizant of what it is you do and what it is you do well, and don't think that because this works or is even the best thing over here, don't assume that is necessary, that you can take whatever it is you're doing over here and apply it identically over here if the context is different, which it is. Phil Heath is bigger than me, it's kind of sad. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. This is weird to say, but I appreciated the discussion in the sense that I liked the question and feel like it drew out some interesting lines of thinking that I haven't gotten into before. So thank you so much to Chadwick for the question. I'm going to get many more Q&As up moving forward. Thanks so much. See you soon. Like the video. Comment below. Let me know what you think. I'm really curious. And I'll see you again. Bye.